The West is under attack from both inside and out, from dark atheistic and religious ideologies, and it's not at all clear whether it will survive or whether it will mutate into another North Korea or Iran. Every year, millions of people emigrate from the Third World to the West, legally or illegally. But nobody goes the other way around. Nobody in the West moves to Afghanistan or Haiti or North Korea or the Republic of the Congo or even to the so-called Democratic Republic of the Congo. The traffic is strictly one way, to the West. Why? Because the West has simply become the best place on earth to live in so many different ways. But the West is also under attack from within. Education has morphed into indoctrination. Our history, our great men and women, our achievements have been recast as irredeemably evil, and our young people clamor for the destruction of our culture. So, can the West resist these attacks? Can it survive? Or is it doomed? Let's investigate. My name is Alex, and welcome to Depth History, where we talk about how the human condition created and creates the human condition. We shouldn't take for granted the West's moral, political, and economic achievements, because many people all over the world want to destroy everything the West has built, to abolish our freedoms and to seize our wealth, because everything we have was stolen from them, or that our societies are immoral, or that we practice the wrong religion, the right religion being Islam or some flavor of the secular religion of Marxism, and that the wrath of God or the inevitable laws of history will eventually catch up with us. History is full of powerful empires that eventually fell. Rome, Carthage, the British Empire, the Soviet Union, the 1,000-year Third Reich, the Aztecs, the Incas, and many more. There is no reason to believe that there's anything different about the West, that it will effortlessly last forever. About 50 years ago, Marxists in the West changed their tactics, but not their goals. The goal was still to destroy Western civilization, but instead of working through political parties and armed coups, Marxists began what they called the Long March. They gradually took over educational institutions from kindergarten through graduate school. They indoctrinated students in the old new Marxist ideology that Western society is and always has been irredeemably evil, responsible for every problem in every country in the world, that Western literature is an instrument of colonialism, imperialism, racism, and fascism, so we have to stop studying it. And in that way, Marxists raised generations of social justice warriors intent on bringing down the West in the name of whatever fashionable cause was all the rage at the moment. The indoctrinated students became teachers and educated the next generation of teachers, politicians, and journalists who, in turn, educated the next generation, and so on. The primary reason cited by historians for the Roman Empire's fall in 476 CE, after more than 1,000 years of Roman history, is the series of invasions by Germanic tribes fleeing the Huns. Today, too, millions of migrants are invading the West, most of them illegally, claiming to be escaping another warlike culture, but with a difference. They're bringing that culture with them, a culture that does not value peace, freedom, and tolerance, but celebrates conquest, compulsion, and intolerance. And they're demanding that the culture from which they fled replace our Western culture. Under the guise of helping our fellow human beings, the Western elites who were educated in the new Marxism, many of them childless with no personal stake in the long-term future of Western civilization, which is in itself a problem, welcome these invaders, or refugees, as they like to call them, shower them with benefits to keep coming, all the while ignoring or even celebrating the slow decline of their own society as the great replacement marches forward. Few politicians and even church leaders seem to care about what this means for the future of the West. There was a time when the West was a proud military power that was quick to defend itself, when it had armies in which its citizens were proud to serve. Today's progressive ideologies have not only eviscerated religious faith, but also patriotism, faith in one's country. Military service is voluntary, but not many volunteer. It often seems that there's no one to defend the West, and that yet another, once powerful empire will go the way of all the rest. Without identifying the role of faith, any history of the West would be incomplete. In the case of Western civilization, there is no alternative to an open acknowledgement of the powerful role of faith in the rise of the West. It would not be true history without it. The Jewish and Christian faiths, or the Christian faith with its roots in the Jewish faith, is the cornerstone of Western civilization. Why was Christianity so crucial in the formation of the West? Because though Western culture owes much to the Greek and Roman cultures, it was the words of the Bible that man was created in the image of a just God. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. A God who had commanded him to do justice in turn, and to proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all its inhabitants. These words inspired the highest qualities of Western civilization, ideas and ideals such as human dignity, human rights, freedom, blind justice, truth, and open debate, even if they weren't always practiced, especially in regard to how the rich and powerful treated the poor or the native peoples they pillaged, conquered, and enslaved. Let's be painfully frank about that. When Europeans, beginning in the 17th century, began to rise against their oppressive governments, they accused the churches of enabling the injustices of their political rulers, and many sought to overthrow the throne-altar alliance of monarchs and churches. During the period that became known as the Enlightenment, philosophers advocated retaining these ideas and ideals, but rejecting the institutions that had nurtured them, replacing belief in religion and tradition with a belief in the faculty of reason, in order to create a better philosophical and political order. One of them, ironically a priest himself, expressed in his posthumous testament the wish that all the world's high and noble would be hanged and strangled with the entrails of the priests. The French Revolution of 1789 was supposed to bring about this enlightened paradise on earth, but instead it brought about the Reign of Terror and the guillotine, a return to the monarchy in the form of Napoleon's dictatorship, a quarter-century of war all over Europe, and finally the restoration of the throne-altar alliance by the Congress of Vienna, which was then followed by the rise of anarchism, socialism, and communism. We all know what happened in the 20th century, how so many tens of millions of lives were sacrificed on the altars of these secular religions. To sum it all up, the Enlightenment failed miserably, but it did achieve one of its goals. Religious faith has severely declined in the West. Churches have been closing almost everywhere. There was a time when the conviction that the world will end soon, that it deserved to end, was based on religion. But today it's based on other sins of mankind, specifically of white European mankind, like the environment, the threat of nuclear war, or the much heralded climate crisis. Instead of orgies of self-flagellation, we in the West should value what only our ancestors achieved, a recognition that all people are created equal, have equal rights, and deserve each other's respect, including people who are different from us, including the other. Humanity is the most diverse life form on planet Earth, and basic to that diversity is the uniqueness of individuality. Each human is unique. No two are identical. No two faces are the same, and no one is substitutable for anyone else. The progressive ideologies so popular today on university campuses reject the individuality of each and every human being, and instead divide people into groups according to skin color, economic class, and oppressed or oppressor, denying their essential humanity and the ability to freely make their own life choices. Let's count the so many different ways that the West really is a better place to live. Only in the West is the idea that every person is endowed with certain unalienable rights, natural rights, rights that weren't a gift from anyone, rights that belong to every human being simply by virtue of being a human being, rights that can't be taken away by anyone. They are unalienable. Only in the West are freedom of speech and its joined-at-the-hip freedom of thought, established by law and custom. Anyone and everyone is free to think, say, or publish their thoughts without fear of retribution by the government. Only in the West is the government not allowed to interfere in religious beliefs, or to imprison anyone without trial, or to seize property without justification and compensation. These are the freedoms that enable people to be fully human, to make their life choices for themselves, instead of having them imposed by some all-knowing, far-off, fearless leader or bureaucrat. Only in the West are laws applied equally to everyone, without regard to race, gender, religion, or national origin, thereby enabling and justifying the concept of government by the consent of all the governed. Only in the West, political change happens, not by military coup or assassination, but peacefully, through free elections by universal suffrage, meaning every citizen, without exception, can vote, and all votes are counted equally. Only in the West can everyone freely choose how they make their living, where to live and work, to buy land or a house and other productive assets, or to start a business, and only in the West are most citizens actually able to afford these things. Only in the West are women treated with dignity, enjoy the same educational and career opportunities as men, are able to live independent lives, and are not the possession of some man, father, brother, or the husband to whom her family married her off, with or without her consent. Only in the West have massive improvements in science and technology, especially medicine, made people's lives healthier, longer, and more comfortable than in any other society in human history. Only in the West has slavery, once universally practiced in every culture, been abolished in law and in practice. Only in the West are there no more wars of conquest. Former colonies have been granted independence, sometimes less out of a desire to do the right thing than wanting to be seen to do the right thing. Only in the West are there no more murderous religious wars. Not since the 17th century, with the notable exceptions of the Nazi Holocaust and Marxist regimes, has there been a resurgence of the religious persecutions of pre-modern Europe. Only in the West is peace a cherished value, and do leaders repeatedly declare their sincere admiration to achieve and preserve worldwide peace in our time. It wasn't only religious faith that propelled the West on its unique path. There were other factors as well. 1,000 years ago, no society had accomplished any of these achievements or even dreamed of them. All civilized societies were strictly hierarchical, with an all-powerful hereditary strongman at the top, supported by an alliance of powerful nobility and equally powerful priesthood, with very few constraints on their power. So how and why did the West, and only the West, change? How did it break away from the pack and set off in a completely new direction to become what it is today? Between the 11th and 13th centuries, many universities were established in the West, initially for the study of theology and the traditional 7 liberal arts, which the Church emphasized, remained subordinate to theology. But the method of instruction, lectures and disputations, where students were required to debate both sides of an issue, exposed them to arguments that undermined the Church-approved positions, arguments they were expected to emphatically reject, which, of course, they did, emphatically, of course. There was also an openness to knowledge derived from other cultures, for example, from Islam and later from China and India. An openness those other cultures didn't share because of their sense of superiority to anything that came from outside their traditions. So there was nothing to be learned from the Christian barbarians. Even during the so-called Dark Ages, there were technological advancements. The astrolabe, compass, eyeglasses, gunpowder, and paper imported from China, and Hindu-Arabic numerals imported from India via Islam. But technological advances are not the same as scientific advances. Even though sailors were using compasses and people were using eyeglasses to help them read, no one understood how they worked. Why does the compass needle point north? How do eyeglasses help people see better? Despite the Church's warnings against these useless speculations, scientists, or natural philosophers as they were then called, continued their efforts to understand. The extreme political fragmentation in Europe, there were more than 300 political units in the Holy Roman Empire alone, encouraged fierce competition among the various kingdoms, princedoms, dukedoms, free cities, etc. The Islamic and Chinese polities, on the other hand, were more unified and more tightly controlled by their rulers, with individual initiatives discouraged in favor of initiatives coming from the top down. By 1500, only 50 years after Johannes Gutenberg's invention of movable type printing, more than 1,000 printing workshops in every important city in Europe had been established. Printing removed the monopoly of the elites, especially churchmen, on reading and writing. If everyone had the same access to book learning, how could the rigid hierarchical structure of European society be justified? If everyone could now read the Bible in their own language, how could the Church's monopoly on theological interpretation be justified? In the Ottoman Empire, the first printed Turkish language book appeared only in 1729, almost 300 years after Gutenberg's invention, and the press was forcibly closed 14 years later. In Persia and the Ottoman Empire, there was only one book of any importance, the Quran, and illiteracy there and in China was in any case so widespread that there was little demand for other books. Printing transformed the West long before it had any effect at all on the other civilizations. Though usury was always forbidden by the Church, as time passed, it was redefined to mean only excessive rates of interest. Reasonable interest rates became acceptable even to the Church, which borrowed heavily to finance its massive building projects and its many Italian wars. The banks that developed provided the capital for the growth of industry, the age of exploration, and long-distance trade. In Islam, interest is still strictly forbidden, so banking developed much later, only after workarounds were devised to make lending compliant with Islamic law, for example by structuring loans as interest-free investments. In 1215, the Church prohibited marriages of the fourth degree of consanguinity, or closer, for example, marriage of first cousins or of uncle and niece. This ruling forced Christians to look further outside the immediate family for their spouses, and it was a major factor in the relative decline of tribalism in the West. In Islamic societies, even today, tribalism and marriage of first cousins remains widespread, with predictable results. The West is definitely not perfect, often far from perfect. It has its successes and its failures. But compared to the other cultures of the world, all of them, past and present, the West is far and away the best. The best of a bad lot, perhaps. But who among us would prefer to live anywhere else? But getting back to the question we asked at the start of this video, can the West survive, or is it doomed? Are there enough of us who value the West, who are willing to fight for its survival? You tell me. If you're interested in learning more about this subject, I've included a list of books to read in the description below. I especially recommend Our Civilizational Moment, The Waning of the West and the War of the Worlds by Os Guinness. Please join me for the next episodes, where we'll be examining in detail individual areas like the rise of religious skepticism and disbelief, human rights, women's rights, the long process of not quite abolishing slavery, and more. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, please click the like icon, share the video, subscribe, and ring the bell so that you'll be notified of new videos as soon as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, why not buy me a coffee at the link below? Thanks for watching, and see you next time.